cost savings. And I will come a little bit more about the structure of the presentation. It's not only about our technology, our products, it's mainly about the question how packaging industry worldwide, especially the flexible packaging, will develop in the next couple of years. First of all, a few words about Esko, where are we? So 9 out of 10 larger consumer brands on a worldwide base are relying on Esko to design and to manufacture their packaging for the products. So we have a pretty high reach on the worldwide packaging market. And Esko is part of Veralto. Veralto is a top and Standard & Poor's 500 listed company. And the mission and vision of Veralto is safeguarding the world's most vital resources. So all the Veralto companies and businesses, they have two things on their top agenda: sustainability and saving the environment. That's what we are trying to achieve with all the products we bring to market. So Esko belongs to the Product Quality and Innovation Platform of Veralto, PQI. And this platform is delivering everything for brand owners or CPG groups, from a solution basically to a solution from source to shelf. So it starts on the left-hand side with ingredient management for brand owners to make sure that they comply according to the regulations. Then you see the green block. Those blocks belong to Esko, which is everything around packaging. Packaging strategy, packaging ideation, packaging design, but then also how we can make the package idea really working and really produce the final package. That's all what we are supporting in Esko. And on the right-hand side, you see our companies like Videojet. They taking care on marking and coding, which is mainly the best before dates that you see on the packages, but also other. So today it's all about our Flexo business unit, how we call it. There everything is combined that we need to support the flexible packaging and the Flexo packaging printing process, which means we have our Flexo prepress software to make packaging design printable in Flexo. And we have our plate making, Flexo plate making and print quality and press efficiency products. So we also basically delivering services to help our converter customers to achieve the right quality on their press for their purpose. Yeah, so what will we learn today? I will part on 4 main points. First of all, there are external drivers that are accelerating the packaging transformation, how I call it. So packaging will change. We will see that what we print today on packaging will be different from what and how we will print tomorrow. It will be a significant change. Then, right now, especially for the flexible packaging segment, we see that in many areas of the world, still rotogravure is the major production process. Flexo is strongly coming into the game, gaining market share. And we will see how both rotogravure and Flexo can manage the new trend to sustainable packaging. Then, of course, we look into our products and the quartz products, what quartz can really do in order to enhance print quality and print efficiency, so print performance, with all the new sustainable packaging that is coming in front of us. And then also, especially how quartz can help to save cost on the press, but also to save wasting resources on the press. So let us start with the evolution of packaging and the external drivers that are behind it. So we have, first we have external drivers that are now coming more and more on the legislation side. So the first thing here, which really has started to significantly change the packaging industry, is the European Union legislation PPWR, so Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. So this is a new regulation that has been set in force and signed by all the European Union countries in February 2025, and August this year it will become fully in force. And this regulation is changing right now significantly the packaging industry in Europe. The main purpose here is that from 2030 onwards, all the packaging that is produced in Europe, all needs really 100%, needs to be 100% recyclable. So today, the vast majority of packaging we produce in the world, also in Europe, is not recyclable. It contains chemical substances, it contains laminates of different polymer types, plastic types, which cannot be separated, and therefore we cannot recycle. And we need to change all of this. There are a couple of other implications. So we need to change substrates. Basically, all the substrates that we're using for flexible packaging today will not be allowed anymore from 2030. We need to change the ink systems. So the regular ink systems that we are using today, solvent-based inks, for example, with nitrocellulose binders, will be banned. So that will not be available anymore in 2030. We will need to find our way to use lower grade materials. So today, especially if you look at flexible packaging, if you are extruding foils, these are extruded out of virgin granulates. And these virgin granulates need to be mixed in 2030 with post-consumer recycled granulates. That has a big impact on the way we are printing on packaging. And why it has set things in motion is because this is not only for European production. Each and every product that is imported into the European Union from 2030 onwards needs to have a packaging that complies with the PPWR guidelines. Of course, you can import, or there might be a possibility to import packaging which is not compliant, but then the EPR, the extended producer responsibility, holds, and that means you have to pay a penalty. So that is basically not something where brand owners are looking for. So although everything started in Europe, we now see in many other countries around the world similar legislations kicking in. The UK, for example, they basically copied the PPWR. They're even one step further because already today you have to print on the package if your packaging is recyclable or not. That has an impact to the consumers. They select the recyclable packages and therefore drives this transformation. We see, for example, even in India, we see an EPR coming in force, extended producer responsibility. Also there are a lot of discussions in place how in India packaging can become more sustainable and recyclable. We see Australia. So Australia until mid of last year, they were basically on a voluntary path that all sustainability in packaging should happen on a voluntary base from the larger brand owners and converter groups mainly. This didn't work. Now they switched to a model where basically they copy the PPWR KPIs, but also timelines. We see, for example, in Brazil, the plastic decree already today is forcing flexible packaging converters to use 28% post-consumer recycled granulates. The reality is 2 to 3%. So there's a big gap, and the government will take actions in order to enforce it. Mexico is also preparing for a more or less copy of the PPWR. Also in Mexico, we see a lot of changes on the converter sites in order to comply. And then last but not least, even in the US, we have several states which have similar regulations in place, or will bring it in place, and also a series of states that are already requesting post-consumer recycled material to be part of each package. So I could extend this with many other countries around the world. So this sustainability packaging transformation is not something that happens in Europe. In the meantime, it happens everywhere. there's a second driver that is becoming more and more active, and that is all about geopolitical conflicts. So especially we see now with the war in Iran and around the Strait of Hormuz, we see some supply challenges of raw material that we need for the printing industry, especially for flexible packaging. So for example, some figures in Germany, the first converters needed to reduce their frame contracts for plastic granulate, PE granulate for example, and the prices went up by up to 100%, so basically doubled. We see that, for example, nitrocellulose ink binders are not available anymore because nitrocellulose is used for military applications and it is gone from the market. So the transformation away from nitrocellulose ink binders is accelerating. And we see basically a trend that now the post-consumer recycled plastic granulates are getting much less expensive than virgin granulates. So on a worldwide base, more and more converters and also brand owners are trying to use more of post-consumer granulate content in the package in order to get their cost under control. These things will maybe transitionary, maybe they will go away, but maybe they will stay. So we have to find a way to manage those situations. So all of this basically leads to a situation where all of a sudden sustainable packaging gets more attractive, of course by legislation, but also because when you print your packages and you produce your packages in a sustainable way with 100% recyclable material, you are less affected by the current geopolitical tensions. And that is now basically leading to I call it a sustainable packaging disruption. So as I said, everything what we print today will change. Tomorrow we will print differently, especially in flexible packaging. So that means we will use lower grade materials, we will use different materials which are becoming more stretchable, which will become thinner, and which also contain post-consumer recycled granulates, which makes printing more difficult. But also we are moving away from the ink systems that we are used to, away from solvent ink in a way, to water-based inks or e-ink. And we are moving and see ink binders to be ink binders on a rapid scale. And what happens there is also that the industry feels on a worldwide base a high need for cost reduction. So we need to find cost reduction possibilities to work against the cost pressure we have. So how are brand owners and larger converter groups reacting to the situation today? This is just what I've collected from a few websites. Wherever you go, you see that brand owners and larger converter groups are very dedicated to bring sustainable packaging to life. You see a lot of commitments, and this train has really left the station. So the brand owners are moving, and especially multinational brand owners are making sure that their solutions are deploying worldwide, because they will not develop packaging twice. So let us look into concrete numbers for Europe. So that is one study. There are many others with very similar results. And that study looked at the expected SKU, stock keeping units, so basically packaging changes that are expected in the next 3 years due to the PPWR. Today in Europe we have about 120,000 packaging changes a year from the brand owners that are working in Europe. We expect that the next 2 years, or let's say between now 2026 and 2030, we will get an increase of 133% on top of the baseline. So in the last years we had 120,000 SKU changes. Now we are getting 160,000 on top. So we are basically coming to 280,000 packaging changes a year that the printing industry needs to manage. And those are mainly driven by sustainability. I had a couple of meetings with major brand owners, let's say multinational brand owners, and I got a confirmation to those numbers. So these are real. Brand owners massively changing products. So here are some numbers about the percentages of packaging changes and where they are coming from. So basically, you see the light blue line. This is a percentage of packaging changes that needed to be done because the product has changed. Of course, if I have a new product, I change my product, I need to change the packaging, ingredients, and those kind of things. And the violet line, these are basically what we call it the product renovations. That means the product stays the same, but the packaging is innovating, the packaging changes. And you clearly see that the percentage of packaging changes due to new products coming to the market is on a historical low, while the changes of packaging is on a historical high at this point. And further increases to widen. There's a little bit more breakdown from which segments these packaging changing are coming. And we see that basically here this is household drink, food industry. They're doing a lot of changes to become compliant with packaging. And then basically the healthcare and personal beauty segment, they are still a little bit behind. But everybody expects that these segments will also ramp up soon in order to change the packaging. And that is, as I said, packaging changes due to sustainability, but also, for example, due to getting less plastic usage. So, for example, brand owners that are making very small pouches, they are changing the package to reduce the size, the space between the pouches in order to save plastic. And many packages are just being printed on thinner and thinner material in order to save plastic. So what exactly is changing for flexible packaging printers? So let's first look into ink changes. So today inks, mainly the majority, are having nitrocellulose ink binders. Some of them already have polyurethane ink binders for special application, lamination application. You need this a little bit as a component, but the majority is NC. We have seen that NC goes away due to military demand, but also it will go away because when you print an NC ink on top of a, let's say a transparent ethylene substrate, PE substrate, and then you recycle it, you get a black substrate or black granulate, because NC is changing the color, and it makes everything what you recycle unusable for the same application. The same is for PBB binders that are typically used in gravure printing inks. Also there you get a color change, you get a kind of yellowish brownish color of your substrate, and also this substrate you can only use in a limited way for similar applications, so you really cannot recycle. The only binder that is recyclable is polyurethane. That is destroyed in the recycling process, de-inking is not an option here, so you need to recycle with ink on top. So the ink systems will go to polyurethane, and I can only say from my experience, I get weekly a few requests from converted customers to help them to move from NC to PU on a worldwide base. That is happening already. So the next thing is solvent inks. So solvent inks contain VOC, volatile organic compounds, and they will be regulated. In the EU, they will not be forbidden, but if you use them, the regulations will be more complex. So it creates for you basically an operational complexity in order to handle them. You also need special permissions to use them. That will make solvent inks more expensive and will basically lead to a transformation to either water-based inks or UV inks. And today, water-based inks are available in use in plenty of cases with zero, or let's say less than 1% VOC content. So pure water inks, and they are used for flexible packaging applications across the board. So this will be basically the next driver that will also change the ink systems. Next subject is what will change is PCR material. From 2030 onwards, everything what we print on, all the substrates, plastic substrates, need to contain PCR material. By the way, paper needs to contain more recycled fibers. Also that will change. But of course the PCR material for flexible packaging is the biggest change. So here you basically see a scan of today's post-consumer recycled material granulates that are used to extrude the white PE. And this is not dirt on the lens, let's say. These are real impurities that are in this film. So if you put your fingers on top of the film, you feel that it's a rough surface. Because if you put post-consumer recycled granulate in, the impurities create Gale particles where the polymerization is not complete. And these are significantly disturbing the printing process. And another important thing is that the surface tension or surface energy of the material is significantly reduced. So that means when you print it on a printing press, you need to take good care of the ink composition and also on the right plate technology in order to transfer the ink properly. Otherwise the ink is coming back to the plate and you have a lot of dirty printing. And the third important point is all materials today, they have a snap back, how we call it. So you stretch it a little bit and then when you release the force, it goes back in the original position. That is easy to handle on printing presses. The PCR containing materials, they lose the snapback. So if you stretch it once, they stay stretched. And if you do it 2-3 times, they tear it in pieces. So let's move to the other substrate changes. I said multi-layer foils are difficult because typically today everything what is food packaging, where you need to protect the packaged good against oxygen, against vapor, water vapor, against UV radiation. That is typically made on a PE base layer with PET barrier layers. These chemicals are incompatible for recycling, so you cannot recycle. So all these multi-layers, which is basically everything what we have for food packaging, will move to new type of substrates. One type is MDO, machine direction oriented PE, where a PE layer is stretched by a factor of 15 in order to make it very dense. And this material then can be used in multi-layer designs as a barrier layer compound. But printability on those materials is different. So they have a much lower surface tension again, and printability is a challenge. The other possibility is to build this barrier layer products from DOPE PE compounds, which is also possible, but even also there, the stretchability will change. So the handling of the material is different. And third point, according to PBWR, every year you have to make your packaging consumption 1% lower. So at the end, the same package must lose weight every year. So let us now look into how well flexo printing and rotogravure printing can master these new sustainability requirements. On the left-hand side, you see the basic principle of a flexo printing machine for flexo packaging application, CI, central impression cylinder. So that is basically the print cylinder. The substrate goes onto the print cylinder and is fixed, so it cannot move while the individual ink stations transfer the ink. This concept means you don't need to really take care a lot about stretchability, about missing snap back effect, about thickness of materials, because you fix it and then you print on it. So this concept is very nicely suitable to run all these new sustainable materials. When we look at the gravure, rotogravure printing machine concept, you have a linear chain of ink stations. So basically the substrate is printed with one color, and then there's a free floating substrate to the next print station and to the next. And during these print stations, the substrate can stretch, it can change. So that is a big concern when you go to thinner substrates and when you go to substrates where the snapback is not there anymore. So basically the gravure concept has difficulties to work with these new materials. And of course, I mean, the gravure industry is an important industry. Gravure press manufacturers are bringing new presses to the market that are much better suitable to handle those materials. but it also means that the existing installed base of gravure presses cannot be really used anymore with the new materials. Gravure printers have to invest in a new gravure press or in a flexo press in the future. So that is a well-known story for the Japanese market, I think. So by taking the labels of water bottles from gravure printing to flexo printing, the thickness could be reduced from 25 micron to 12 micron, which is a 52% plastic saving. Just as one of the anecdotes what gravure to flexo conversion means, and this is what we see on a worldwide base. So every time when there's a conversion happening for packages from gravure to flexo, there's also a significant saving of plastic material, substrate material involved. And then, yeah, this picture went through the presses worldwide, the newspapers worldwide. I think you all know this. That, in my eyes, maybe it's probably only a marketing gag at the end, probably, but it tells a story. And the story is that, yeah, there is shortcomings to the current geopolitical situation for some raw materials, especially naphtha, but also others. And yeah, those packages, ships packages, of course, were printed on the gravure press, and that is mandatory to use solvent inks, which contain naphtha. There are no other ink possibilities really established for gravure printing due to all kinds of technical reasons. Whereas when you move to flexo printing, you have the possibility, of course, to use solvent inks for now, but it's very, let's say, it's pretty straightforward to change over to water-based inks. The solutions are available and in place in many areas of the world. And you can also go to UV inks, for example, for smaller formats, pouches, shrink sleeves. That is also a significant trend around worldwide to move gravure to UV ink presses. And basically, water-based inks are either naphtha reduced or even naphtha-free. So then let's look into the CO2 footprint of flexo and photogravure printing. So that is a study from University of Beijing, and Dr. Moser. There are many very similar studies around the planet, and basically they all come to the conclusion that the VOC emission or CO2 emission, whatever you take it here, per square meter of produced substrate or printed substrate is about 70 to 80% lower for a flexo press compared to a photogravure press. And why is this? Because in the photogravure printing process, we are printing with very thick ink films in order to get the color strengths. A flexo press is printing very thin ink films, and several of them together, in order to come to the same color strength in the meantime. And that saves significant amount of ink. And just to continue here before translation, there's a very nice story from Orion, which is a brand owner in Korea. They are manufacturing their own packaging. They have been transforming the conversion from gravure to flexo now with multiple presses moving from gravure to flexo. And in average, they have seen that they now need 60% less ink to produce the same packages. 60% less ink. That is a significant difference. So looking at the market shares for flexo and gravure printing worldwide, in the 1990s, flexo had a worldwide market share of about 5% on flexo packaging. In the meantime, you see that in North America, the conversion to flexo is nearly completed, 80% flexo. We have the same in Northern Europe, 85% flexo. In Latin America, in Southern Europe, we're also above, let's say, very close to the turning point. Australia, 70% flexo in the meantime. Asia is still at about 10% flexo. So here, photogravure is the most dominant print process in many countries. But it's important to look at the dynamics. So the global flexo packaging market is growing with about 5 to 6% CAGR. Many different numbers, but they all meet at that level. And about 2/3 of that growth is currently going into flexo. Only 1/3 is captured by gravure printing. So that will over time strengthen the position of Flexo significantly. Just a little bit more details about Flexo growth per country in Asia. India has a very high CAGR for Flexo. So the Flexo packaging is printing up to 10%, maybe even more, nobody really knows it, annual. We see heavy growth in China, we see also high growth in Korea, and also Japan, according to at least the data I have access to. So Flexo is really also in Asia the winning process.